Jake Morrison pulled his heavy duffel bag through the gleaming corridors of Kepler Station. The massive space station spun slowly in the darkness between stars, creating artificial gravity that felt almost like home. Almost, but not quite. Everything here was too clean, too perfect, too alien. He checked his tablet again. Room 847C, Level 12, Student Housing Wing. His new home for the next 4 years. Jake still couldn't believe he was actually here at Galactic Exchange University. 2 years ago, humans had barely known aliens existed. Now he was about to live with one. The corridors buzzed with activity. Students from a dozen different worlds walked past him, and Jake tried not to stare. A group of tall, blue-skinned beings glided by with perfect posture. Their movements were so smooth, they seemed to float. Behind them came something that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin rustling with each step. 2 creatures that reminded Jake of oversized butterflies fluttered overhead, their wings creating patterns of light in the air. Jake found his room and pressed his palm against the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The room was bigger than he had expected, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a large window that showed the stars beyond. One side of the room was already occupied. Strange geometric patterns covered the walls, and the desk held devices Jake didn't recognize. He dropped his bag on the empty bed and looked around. His roommate wasn't here yet, but Jake could tell a lot from what he saw. Everything was organized perfectly. Books were arranged by height and color. Even the clothes in the open closet were sorted in some system Jake couldn't figure out. Jake unpacked quickly, throwing his clothes into drawers and setting up his computer. He pulled out his old baseball from high school and tossed it against the wall, catching it as it bounced back. The familiar rhythm helped him think. Back on Earth, his teachers always told him to stop fidgeting, but the movement helped his brain work better. He was juggling the baseball with 2 other balls he had brought when his tablet chimed. New message from his sister Katie, back on Earth. Jake sat on his bed, still tossing 1 ball against the wall while he read. How's space college, little brother? Mom wants to know if you're eating real food or just those nutrition cubes she saw on the news. Dad says to remember that you're representing all of humanity, so try not to embarrass our entire species. No pressure or anything. Love you. Jake smiled and started typing back with one hand while catching the ball with the other. Food is weird, but edible. Roommate hasn't shown up yet. Pretty sure I'm already embarrassing humanity just by being here. Tell Mom I'm fine, and Dad I'll try not to start any interstellar wars. Miss you guys. He sent the message and pulled up his homework. Professor Chun's quantum mechanics problems were due tomorrow, and they looked brutal. Jake put on his headphones, letting classical music fill his ears while he worked on the equations. The ball continued its steady rhythm against the wall. Problems were challenging, but Jake found his groove. He worked through the math while part of his mind followed the music and another part tracked the ball's movement. His professors back on Earth had called it impossible. They said no one could focus on multiple things at once and do them all well. But Jake had never been able to work any other way. He was halfway through problem 7 when the door opened. Jake looked up to see his roommate for the first time. The alien was tall and thin, with pale gray skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. 4 eyes were arranged in a diamond pattern on his face, and they were all staring directly at Jake. The alien's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth that looked almost human, but not quite. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Jake sat cross-legged on his bed with his tablet in his lap, headphones around his neck, and one hand still holding the baseball he had been throwing. The alien stood frozen in the doorway like someone had pressed a pause button. Hi, Jake," said finally. "I'm Jake Morrison. You must be my roommate." The alien blinked all 4 eyes in sequence, a ripple effect that was oddly mesmerizing. "I am Zeph Curry of the 7th Research Pod of the Vexnari. His voice was melodic but precise, like he was reading from a textbook. I was told my roommate would be human, but I was not prepared for this. For what? Jake asked, setting down his tablet but still absently tossing the ball. Zethkari stepped into the room, his 4 eyes tracking the ball's movement. Your behavioral patterns are inconsistent with all recorded data about human cognitive function. According to our psychological profiles, your species cannot effectively process multiple information streams simultaneously. Jake caught the ball and stared at his roommate. I'm sorry, what now? You were solving advanced mathematical equations while listening to audio, entertainment, and performing a repetitive physical task. This should not be possible for a human brain. Zethkari moved closer, his eyes now focused entirely on Jake's face. Are you perhaps a genetic variant of your species? Dude, I'm just doing homework. Jake held up his tablet. The music helps me concentrate, and the ball helps me think. I've always been this way. Zethkari's head tilted to one side. This contradicts fundamental principles of cognitive psychology. Single-task focus is the most efficient method of mental processing for all known species. Jake shrugged. Works for me. I tried the whole single-focus thing in high school, but my grades actually got worse. My brain gets bored if it's not juggling multiple things. Fascinating. Zethkari moved to his desk and pulled out a device that looked like a crystal tablet. Would you mind if I observed your study habits? This could be significant for my xenopsychology research. Sure, I guess. Just don't make it weird. Jake picked up his tablet again. So what's your major? Behavioral analysis with a focus on cross-species psychological adaptation. Zethkari activated his device, and holographic symbols began floating above its surface. I study how different species interact and learn from each other. Your species is particularly interesting because you are so new to galactic society. Jake nodded and went back to his homework. Problem 8 was even harder than the others, involving 3-dimensional wave functions that made his head hurt. He put his headphones back on and resumed throwing the ball against the wall. Within minutes, he was lost in the work again. The music created a backdrop that helped his mind focus, while the physical movement of catching and throwing the ball seemed to unlock creative solutions to the mathematical problems. He barely noticed Zethkari watching him with all 4 eyes. The Vexnari student took careful notes as Jake worked. Every few minutes, Jake would stop writing, close his eyes, and let the ball bounce in increasingly complex patterns while he thought. Then he would suddenly open his eyes and write furiously for several minutes before going back to the rhythmic throwing. How many different thought processes are you running simultaneously? Zethkari asked after an hour of observation. Jake paused, the ball frozen in his hand. I don't really think about it that way. It's more like everything flows together. The music gives me a rhythm, the ball gives my hands something to do so they don't distract my brain, and that lets me think about the math problem from different angles at the same time. Different angles simultaneously? Yeah, like I can see the problem as pure mathematics, as a physical representation of wave behavior, and as a pattern that relates to the music all at once. Usually one of those perspectives gives me the answer. Zethkari made more notes. This is unprecedented. Vexnari cognitive theory suggests that such parallel processing should create interference patterns that reduce overall effectiveness. Maybe. For you guys, Jake said, going back to his work. But humans are weird. We've had to be adaptable to survive. He finished the last problem, just as the station's lighting dimmed to simulate evening. Jake stretched and looked at his roommate, who was still taking notes. So what's the deal with all the analysis? Jake asked. Am I that strange? Zethkari set down his device and looked at Jake with all 4 eyes. Jake Morrison, in the past 2 hours you have demonstrated cognitive capabilities that should not exist according to our understanding of biological intelligence. Either our entire field of xenopsychology is fundamentally flawed, or humans possess abilities that we have never encountered before. Jake grinned and tossed his ball one more time. Welcome to Earth Logic, roommate. We specialize in doing the impossible. The next morning, Jake woke up to find Zethkari already at his desk, surrounded by floating holographic displays. The alien had been up for hours, reviewing data and making notes about his strange human roommate. Morning, Jake mumbled, stretching. As he got out of bed, did you sleep at all? Vexnari require only 3 hours of rest per cycle, Zethkari replied without looking up. I spent the remaining time analyzing your behavior patterns from yesterday. The results are even more unusual than I initially calculated. Jake grabbed his towel and headed for the shower. Still thinking on some kind of freak? Not a freak, an impossibility. After getting ready, Jake grabbed his backpack and headed for the door. Come on, we'll be late for breakfast. You can study me while I eat. The station's main cafeteria was enormous, with sections designed for different species' dietary needs. Jake grabbed a tray and loaded it with what looked like normal food, though he suspected most of it was synthesized. Zethkari selected a bowl of something that looked like glowing soup. They found seats at a mixed table, where several other students were already eating. Jake recognized Lisa Chun, another human from his advanced engineering class, and waved her. Over. Jake, how's the first night with an alien roommate? Lisa asked, sliding her tray next to his. Educational, Jake said, unwrapping what he hoped was a sandwich. Meet Zethkari. He thinks I'm scientifically impossible. Lisa laughed. That's what my roommate said too. Something about humans being too chaotic for proper analysis. Zethkari looked up from his soup. You experience similar cognitive anomalies? If you mean can I study while watching movies and texting my friends, then yeah, Lisa said. Drove my parents crazy, but it's how my brain works best. This is highly significant, Zethkari murmured, making notes on his device. Multiple subjects displaying identical impossible behaviors. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud crash from across the cafeteria. A massive alien with red skin and bone spikes protruding from his shoulders had knocked over a table. Students scattered as he approached their section. Which one of you is the human Jake Morrison? The alien demanded, his voice like grinding stone. Jake sighed and stood up. That would be me. And you are? Cretan of the Thokanari warrior clan. I have come to test the worthiness of your species. The cafeteria fell silent. Even the floating service robots stopped moving. Jake looked around at all the staring faces and shrugged. Okay, I guess. What kind of test? Cretan's eyes blazed with excitement. Combat, strategy, tests of strength and wisdom. Your species claims to be worthy of joining the Galactic Confederation, but you have no history of glorious battle. We've had plenty of battles, Jake said mildly. We just don't usually brag about them, then prove it. Tomorrow after classes, we meet in the recreational combat chamber. Bring whatever weapons your species prefers. Jake scratched his head. How about we make it interesting? Instead of just fighting, let's do a series of challenges. Combat, sure, but also puzzles, strategy games, maybe some sports. Cretan's bone spikes rattled with what might have been laughter. You wish to delay your inevitable defeat with children's games? I want to make sure we both have fun, Jake said. Win or lose, we should enjoy it, right? The alien warrior stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. We shall test all aspects of warrior excellence. But when you lose, you must acknowledge the superiority of Thokanari combat doctrine. And if I win? Impossible. But if somehow you do not lose completely, I will consider that your species has potential. After Cretan left, the cafeteria slowly returned to normal. Jake sat back down and continued eating his sandwich like nothing had happened. You just challenged a Thokanari warrior to combat, Zethkari said, all four eyes wide. They are the most feared military species in the galaxy. I challenged him to games, Jake corrected. There's a difference. Lisa shook her head. Jake, what are you thinking? That guy could probably break you in half. Maybe in a straight fight, Jake admitted. But I'm not planning a straight fight. Their first class was theoretical physics with Professor Kolthara, a floating jellyfish-like creature who communicated through changing colors and patterns. Jake found the translation device helpful, but still struggled to follow some of the more complex concepts. The professor presented a problem that had stumped the class for weeks: how to calculate the energy requirements for a theoretical, faster-than-light communication system. Students from 6 different species had tried various approaches, but none had found a complete solution. Jake raised his hand. Can I try 3 different approaches? The professor's colors shifted to what the translator called curious purple. Multiple approaches to the same problem? Explain. Jake stood up and walked to the holographic display. Well, I can see this as a pure energy calculation, which gives us this equation. He wrote symbols in the air, and they glowed as they formed mathematical formulas. But I can also see it as a communication theory problem, which changes the parameters like this. More symbols appeared. And if I think about it as a space-time geometry issue, the whole thing looks different. He worked quickly, his hands moving in complex patterns, as he built 3 separate solutions side by side. The other students watched in amazement as Jake seemed to think along multiple tracks simultaneously. Now here's the interesting part. Jake continued. Each approach gives a different answer, but they're all partially correct. If I combine them ... He gestured, and the 3 solutions merged into a single elegant equation. I get something that works for all 3 perspectives. Professor Kolthara's colors cycled through what the translator called profound astonishment. In 40 years of teaching, I have never seen a student solve this problem, let alone provide 3 solutions simultaneously. After class, Jake was surrounded by alien students asking questions about his method. A tall crystalline being named Silara wanted to know how he could hold multiple mathematical concepts in his mind at once. 2 of the butterfly-like Zephyrians asked if all humans could process information in parallel streams. I don't know about all humans, Jake said honestly. I just work with what I've got. Zethkari pulled him aside as they left the classroom. Jake, I need to ask you something important. Has anyone from your government or military ever tested your cognitive abilities? Not really. I mean, I took the standard tests to get into the exchange program, but nothing special. Why? Because what you did in there isn't just unusual for humans. It's unusual for any species. The Vexnari are considered the most analytically gifted race in the galaxy, and none of us could solve that problem. Jake shrugged. Maybe you're thinking about it too hard. Sometimes the best solution comes from not trying to be perfect. That afternoon, Jake's engineering class presented another challenge. Professor Vexenal, a spider-like being with 8 arms, assigned teams to design a new type of space habitat. Each team had a week to complete the project. Jake's team included Lisa, a nervous Aquarian named Blue Deep, and a rock-like Terran called Stoneheart. While the other team spent hours debating the best approach, Jake spread out on the floor with his tablet, some paper, and his ever-present baseball. Okay, team, he said, bouncing the ball off the wall while typing on his tablet. Let's think about this differently. Instead of designing a perfect habitat, let's design one that can adapt to different situations. He worked on structural calculations while Lisa researched environmental systems. At the same time, he was helping Blue Deep with the water recycling components and discussing mineral extraction with Stoneheart. His teammates were amazed at how he could contribute to all 4 aspects of the project simultaneously. How do you keep track of everything? Blue Deep asked, his gills fluttering with nervousness. I don't keep track, Jake said, still bouncing the ball. I just let my brain work on whatever part feels right at the moment. The important stuff sticks, and the rest sorts itself out. By the end of the class, Jake's team had completed more work than any of the others. Their habitat design was innovative, practical, and included features that none of the other teams had considered. Professor Vexenol examined their work with several of his 8 eyes. This is acceptable progress for a week's work. How did you accomplish so much in a single session? We had Jake, Lisa said simply. That evening, Jake found Zethkari in their room, surrounded by even more holographic displays than before. The alien was reviewing video footage of Jake's performance in both classes. I have been in contact with the university's xenopsychology department, Zethkari said without looking up. They want to study you. Study me how? Cognitive tests, brain scans, behavioral analysis. They believe you may represent a new type of intelligence that we have never encountered before. Jake flopped onto his bed and started juggling his 3 balls. What do you think? I think, Zethkari said slowly, that your species may be far more remarkable than any of us realized. The way you process information, solve problems, and adapt to new situations. It defies everything we know about how minds work. Or maybe, Jake said, catching all 3 balls in one hand, you just don't know how human minds work yet. Zethkari's 4 eyes focused on Jake with laser intensity. That is exactly what I am beginning to suspect. The next day, word about Jake's challenge with Cretan had spread throughout the station. Students from every species gathered in the recreational complex to watch. Jake arrived to find hundreds of aliens filling the viewing galleries, their excited chatter creating a symphony of different languages. Cretan stood in the center of the main arena, surrounded by weapons and equipment from his homeworld. His red skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his bone spikes seemed sharper than before. He looked like he was born for battle. Jake walked up carrying only his backpack and his baseball. He looked very small next to the massive warrior. You bring no weapons? Cretan demanded. Do you surrender before we begin? I brought what I need, Jake said calmly. So what's first? Cretan gestured to a complex holographic maze that filled one corner of the arena. Strategic thinking. Navigate the maze and reach the center faster than your opponent. This tests planning and decision-making. The maze was 3-dimensional, with floating platforms, moving walls, and obstacles that changed every few seconds. Most beings would need several minutes just to analyze the possible paths. Ready? Cretan asked, taking his position at 1. Entrance. Jake nodded and stepped up to his entrance. Let's do this. The maze activated, and both competitors entered. Cretan moved methodically, analyzing each choice point and selecting the most logical path. His Thokanari training emphasized careful planning and tactical superiority. Jake did something completely different. He started moving immediately, not bothering to plan more than 2 or 3 steps ahead. When he hit a dead end, he backtracked quickly and tried a new direction. When walls moved and blocked his path, he adapted instantly instead of recalculating his entire route. The watching aliens murmured in confusion. Jake's approach seemed random, almost chaotic. He was taking paths that led away from the center, jumping across gaps that looked too wide, and generally ignoring every principle of good maze navigation. But he was moving fast. Very fast, while Cretan was still analyzing the optimal route. Through the middle section, Jake suddenly appeared at the center platform. He had found a path that shouldn't have existed, using the maze's own moving parts to create shortcuts that weren't there when he started. Impossible, Cretan roared. You could not have planned that route. I didn't plan it, Jake said, catching his breath. I just kept moving and adapted as I went. Zethkari was taking frantic notes in the viewing gallery. He created the solution while executing it, he muttered to Lisa. No pre-planning, just continuous real-time adaptation. The second challenge was physical combat, but with a twist. Instead of direct fighting, they had to navigate an obstacle course while battling. Automated defense systems. The course was designed to test both combat skills and environmental awareness. Krishan charged through the course like a force of nature. His massive strength let him smash through barriers, and his combat training helped him destroy the defense. Drones with brutal efficiency. It was impressive and terrifying to watch. Jake took a completely different approach again. Instead of fighting the course, he seemed to dance with it. He used the defense system's own attacks to help him reach higher platforms. When drones shot at him, he positioned himself so their missed shots would destroy obstacles in his path. He turned the entire course into a partner instead of an enemy. Both finished at almost the same time, but Jake looked like he had barely broken a sweat while Krishan was breathing heavily. How? The warrior demanded. I have trained for this type of combat since childhood. You fought against the course, Jake explained. I worked with it. Same result, less energy. The third challenge was a strategy game similar to chess, but played in 3 dimensions with pieces that could change their abilities during play. It was considered one of the most complex games in the galaxy. Krishan was a master of the game. He had studied thousands of matches and memorized countless strategies. He played with precision and power, building devastating attacks that should have overwhelmed any opponent. Jake had never seen the game before. He spent the first few minutes just figuring out how the pieces moved. Then he started playing in a way that made no sense to anyone watching. Instead of following established opening strategies, Jake moved pieces seemingly at random. He made attacks that looked like mistakes and defenses that left obvious gaps. Krishan took advantage of every apparent error, building what looked like an unstoppable position. Then, suddenly, Jake's scattered pieces came together in a pattern that no one had seen coming. His random-looking moves had set up a trap, so complex that even the watching Vexnari strategist couldn't follow all the connections. In 3 moves, Krishan's powerful position collapsed completely. Victory to the human, announced the game's referee. Krishan stared at the board in shock. But your moves made no strategic sense. They made sense to me, Jake said. I just think about it differently than you do. The final challenge was supposed to be a test of knowledge and wisdom. Each competitor had to solve a series of puzzles that combined mathematics, physics, logic, and creative thinking. The puzzles were designed by the station's best minds to be nearly impossible. Jake looked at the first puzzle for about 30 seconds, then started writing. He moved to the second puzzle while still working on the first, then to the third while solutions for the previous 2 flowed from his hands. Within minutes, he was working on all 10 puzzles simultaneously. The watching crowd fell silent. Even Krishan stopped working on his own puzzles to stare. Jake's hands moved in complex patterns, writing equations on one puzzle while drawing diagrams for another and building a 3-dimensional model for a third. His mind seemed to be running on multiple tracks at once, each focused on a different problem, but somehow connected to all the others. When he finished, Jake had solved all 10 puzzles in less time than most beings would need for just one. Krishan had completed 3 puzzles using traditional Thokanari logic methods. They were perfect solutions, but there weren't enough of them. The warrior set down his tools and walked over to Jake. For a moment, the human thought he might be about to get smashed by those massive fists. Instead, Krishan did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He knelt. I have never seen anything like what you just did, Krishan said, his voice filled with wonder instead of anger. Your species does not fight like warriors. You do not think like strategists. You do not solve puzzles like scholars, yet you defeated me in all these areas. I don't know about defeated, Jake said, feeling uncomfortable with the big alien kneeling in front of him. We just think about things differently. Yes. Krishan stood up, his bone spikes rattling with excitement. That is exactly the point. For generations, the Thokanari have believed that strength comes from perfecting established methods. But you show strength through adaptation and creativity. You create new methods as you need them. The crowd was buzzing with excitement and confusion. Students who had expected to see a simple contest between species had witnessed something far more significant. Jake's performance wasn't just unusual. It suggested entirely new ways of approaching problems. Dr. Nexara, the veterinary psychology professor, pushed through the crowd to reach Jake. "Mr. Morrison, I must speak with you immediately. What you have demonstrated today contradicts fundamental principles of cognitive science." "It's just how I think," Jake said for what felt like the 100th time. "No," Dr. Nexara replied, her 4 eyes intense with scientific excitement. "It is how your entire species thinks. And if my preliminary research is correct, it may be exactly what the galaxy has been missing." Jake looked confused. Missing for what? Dr. Nexara exchanged glances with Zethkari, who had made his way down from the viewing gallery. "There are things about galactic history that first-year students are not usually told," she said slowly. "Threats that we have faced before and may face again. Enemies that cannot be defeated through traditional strength or conventional wisdom." "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that adapt to counter any predictable strategy," Zethkari said quietly. "The kind that learn from every attack and become stronger with each encounter. The kind that have made entire species extinct because they could not think of truly new solutions fast enough." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And you think humans can do something about that?" "I think," Dr. Nexara said, "that your species represents something we have never seen before. An intelligence based on adaptation rather than optimization. Creativity instead of calculation. The ability to find solutions that should not exist because you are not limited by what should be possible." Cretan nodded vigorously. "In battle, the most dangerous enemy is not the strongest or the smartest. It is the one who can change tactics faster than you can adapt to them. Today you showed me that humans are that kind of enemy. But more importantly, you could be that kind of ally." Jake looked around at all the alien faces staring at him with mixtures of curiosity, excitement, and hope. He had come to the university just wanting to learn and make friends. He had never expected to become some kind of symbol for his entire species. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Dr. Nexara said, "we need to understand exactly what makes human cognition so unique. And we need to understand it quickly." "Why quickly?" 3 days after Jake's demonstration in the arena, emergency alarms started blaring throughout Kepler Station. Students rushed to viewing ports and communication terminals as news spread through the corridors like wildfire. The threat Dr. Nexara had mentioned was no longer theoretical. A Void Singer probe ship had entered the system. Jake found himself in the station's main command center, surrounded by professors and senior staff who looked terrified. Through the massive viewing window, he could see a dark shape moving against the stars. It didn't look like much, just a black triangle about the size of a small building. But the aliens around him were treating it like a death sentence. "How long do we have?" asked Commander Yelenoth, the station's leader. Her blue skin had turned pale, and her normally steady voice shook. "Standard evacuation protocols require 18 hours minimum," reported the operations officer. "We have 20,000 students from 12 different species aboard. The probe will analyze our evacuation patterns within 6 hours," Dr. Nexara said grimly. "Once it understands our movements and capabilities, it will call the main fleet. After that, escape becomes impossible." Jake raised his hand like he was still in class. What exactly are these Void Singer things?" Commander Yelenoth turned to him with surprise. "You haven't been briefed?" "Dr. Nexara, I thought you were going to explain." "There hasn't been time," the professor interrupted. "Mr. Morrison, the Void Singers are an ancient machine intelligence. They appear every few thousand years, systematically destroying any civilization that has grown too large or too advanced. Why? We don't know. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, they just arrive and begin extermination protocols. The last time they appeared was 3,000 years ago. They wiped out the Kefmori Empire in less than 6 months. Zefkari stepped forward from where he had been taking notes. The Kefmori were the most advanced military civilization in galactic history. They had weapons that could destroy entire star systems and defensive networks that should have been impenetrable. What happened to them? Jake asked. The Void Singers adapted, Commander Yelena said simply. Every weapon the Kefmori used, every tactic they tried, every defensive strategy they employed, the machines learned from it and developed countermeasures. Within months, the Kefmori advantage became useless. Jake looked out at the probe ship. It was moving slowly through the system, apparently scanning everything it encountered. So they're like the ultimate learning computer? In a way, yes. They analyze patterns of behavior and technology, then adapt their own systems to counter them perfectly. No species has ever found a defense that works for more than a few battles. Because everyone thinks the same way, Jake said suddenly. Command center fell quiet. Everyone stared at him. What do you mean? Commander Yelenoth asked. Jake started pacing, his baseball appearing in his hand as it always did when he was thinking hard. Every species you've told me about, the Vexnari, the Thokanari, the Kefmori, they all approach problems logically, right? They analyze the situation, develop the best strategy, and execute it perfectly. Of course. That is how intelligent beings solve problems. But what if that's exactly what the Void Singers expect? Jake was tossing the ball now, his mind clearly working on multiple levels. What if they're designed to counter logical, systematic approaches? What if the reason no one has ever beaten them is because everyone thinks the same way? Dr. Nexara's 4 eyes widened. You're suggesting that predictable thought patterns are actually a weakness against an adaptive enemy. I'm suggesting that maybe unpredictable thought patterns are a strength. Jake caught the ball and looked around the room. How many humans are on this station? 4, including yourself, Commander Yelenoth replied. Why? Because I have a crazy idea, and I'm going to need help from people who think like I do. Within an hour, Jake was in a small conference room with Lisa Chun, Marcus Webb, and Amy Rodriguez, the only other humans on Kepler Station. Marcus was an engineering student with spiky black hair who always seemed to be building something. Amy was a linguistics major who could speak 6 human languages and was learning 4 alien ones. So let me get this straight, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. You want us to take on an ancient machine intelligence that has never been defeated, using a plan that you haven't actually figured out yet? That's about right, Jake admitted. But here's the thing, I don't think we're supposed to figure out a plan. I think that's the whole point, Amy frowned. I'm not following. Look, every species that's ever fought these things has done the same thing. They analyze the enemy, develop a strategy, and execute it. But the Void Singers are designed to counter that approach. So what if we do the opposite? What's the opposite of having a plan? Lisa asked. Having no plan. Or having a dozen different plans and switching between them randomly. Or making it up as we go along. Jake was pacing again, his ball bouncing steadily. What if we pilot a ship out there and just ... improvise? Marcus laughed, but it sounded nervous. Jake, that's not tactics, that's suicide. Is it? Or is it the one thing these machines have never encountered before? Jake stopped pacing and looked at his fellow humans. Think about it. What's the most human thing we do? Complain about everything? Amy suggested. Besides that, we adapt, we change our minds, we try things that shouldn't work. We make mistakes and turn them into solutions. We're the only species I've met that's good at being unpredictable. Lisa was nodding slowly. You know what? He might be right. I've been here 3 weeks and every alien I've met is brilliant at their specialty, but terrible at thinking outside their field. They can't multitask like we can. So what are you proposing exactly? Marcus asked. Jake grinned. I'm proposing that we steal a ship and go confuse the hell out of that probe. An hour later, they were standing in the shuttle bay with Commander Yelena, who looked like she was reconsidering every decision that had led to this moment. This is madness, she said for the 5th time. 4 untrained students against a Void Singer probe. It's suicide. Maybe, Jake admitted. But the alternative is waiting here while it calls for backup. At least this way we're doing something. Something insane. Sometimes insane is exactly what you need. Zethkari appeared at Jake's shoulder. If you're going to do this, I'm coming with you. Jake shook his head. No offense, but you think too logically. This only works if we're completely unpredictable. Then, I'll observe and record, Zethkari insisted. If this fails, someone needs to document what happened. If it succeeds, someone needs to understand how. Jake looked at his roommate's 4 determined eyes and sighed. Fine, but you stay quiet and let us humans be weird. The shuttle they chose was small and fast, designed for short-range transport rather than combat. It had basic shields and a few light weapons, but nothing that would threaten a real warship, which was exactly what Jake wanted. Remember, he said as they strapped in, no planning beyond the next 30 seconds. No systematic approaches, no logical responses. We're going to be the most annoying, unpredictable, chaotic opponents this thing has ever seen. Marcus powered up the engines. So our strategy is to have no strategy? Our strategy is to be human, Jake corrected. Let's show this machine what Earth logic looks like. The shuttle launched from Kepler Station and headed toward the probe. Ship, behind them, 20,000 aliens watched from viewing ports and hoped that 4 young humans could do something that the greatest civilizations in galactic history had never managed. As they approached the Void Singer probe, Jake felt a strange calm settle over him. For the first time since arriving at the university, he wasn't trying to fit into someone else's idea of how intelligence should work. He was just going to be himself and trust that being human was enough. The probe detected their approach and began scanning their small ship. Jake could almost feel the ancient machine intelligence trying to analyze their intentions, predict their tactics, and prepare countermeasures. Hey, Amy, he said casually. Remember that song you were humming yesterday? The one with the weird rhythm? You mean the experimental jazz piece? Why? Start broadcasting it on all frequencies. Not as communication, just as noise. That's random. Exactly. As Amy's strange music began flooding the space around them, Jake saw the probe's movement patterns change slightly. It was trying to analyze the audio signal for hidden meaning or tactical significance. There wasn't any. It was just music that followed no predictable pattern. Marcus, start flying like you're drunk. What? Not dangerous drunk. Fun drunk. Like you're at a party and showing off for someone cute. Marcus grinned and began putting the shuttle through a series of loops and spirals that served no tactical purpose whatsoever. They were beautiful to watch, but completely meaningless from a military perspective. The probe's scans became more intensive. It was clearly confused by their behavior. Lisa, can you make our shields pulse in a random pattern? Not stronger or weaker, just different. I can make them flicker like a broken Christmas light if you want. Perfect. As their small ship approached the massive probe, it was broadcasting music, flying in decorative patterns, and flickering with lights that served no purpose. The Void Singer probe hung in space like a dark knife, its sensors focused entirely on the small human shuttle that was behaving unlike anything in its vast database. For 3,000 years, it had analyzed and countered every possible threat. Ships attacked with weapons, it had defenses. Ships fled in predictable patterns, it had pursuit protocols. Ships tried to hide using stealth technology, it had detection systems. But this ship was playing music, flying in pretty spirals, and flashing lights like a festival decoration. Jake watched the probe's movements on their scanner. It's confused, he said with satisfaction. Look at how it keeps changing position. It doesn't know if we're a threat or not. That's because we don't know if we're a threat or not, Marcus pointed out, spinning the shuttle through another unnecessary loop. Exactly. How can it predict our next move if we don't even know what it is? Lisa laughed despite the danger they were in. This is the weirdest battle strategy in galactic history. It's not a battle strategy, Jake corrected. It's an anti-strategy. Strategy. Amy's experimental jazz filled the space around them, creating audio chaos that the probe kept trying to decode. Jake, it's starting to move closer. What do we do now? Jake pulled out his baseball and started tossing it while he thought. Behind him, Zethkari was taking frantic notes and muttering to himself about impossible human cognitive patterns. Now, we get weird, Jake said finally. Marcus, I want you to fly directly at that thing, but not like you're attacking. Fly like you're trying to show it something cool. Show it what? I don't know, make it up. Marcus shook his head but adjusted their course. The shuttle began moving toward the probe in a complex pattern that looked almost like dancing. They spiraled closer, then pulled away, then came back from a different angle. The probe's response was immediate and telling. Instead of preparing defensive systems, it began matching their movements, as if trying to understand what they were doing. It's learning our dance, Amy observed. Good, Jake said. Let it learn. Lisa, can you route power through our systems in random patterns? Nothing dangerous. Just make our energy signature as chaotic as possible. I can make us look like a ship having an electrical seizure. Perfect. As Lisa worked, their shuttle began flickering and pulsing with energy in patterns that made no sense. The probe's scans became more intensive, trying to understand what kind of malfunction could create such readings. Now, Amy, start mixing different types of music. Classical, rock, jazz, whatever you've got. Just layer them together. That's going to sound terrible. That's the point. The audio chaos that resulted was like nothing the probe had ever encountered. Music from a dozen different human traditions overlapped and interfered with each other, creating sounds that were sometimes beautiful, sometimes awful, and always completely unpredictable. Jake could see the probe's systems working frantically, trying to find patterns in the madness. But there were no patterns to find, because the humans weren't following any. Okay, this is working, Jake said. But we need to do more than just confuse it. We need to make it go away. How do we fight something we can't hurt? Marcus asked, still piloting their elaborate dance around the probe. We don't fight it, Jake said, an idea forming in his mind. We make friends with it. The others stared at him. What? Think about it. This thing has spent thousands of years destroying civilizations that tried to fight it. But what if someone tried to communicate instead? Jake, it's a machine designed for extermination, Lisa said. It doesn't want to make friends. Maybe not. But it's also designed to learn and adapt. What if we teach it something new? Amy turned around in her seat. What could we possibly teach an ancient superintelligence? Jake grinned and started juggling his baseball, along with two styluses he grabbed from the console. How to be human. 4. The next hour, the small shuttle engaged in the strangest encounter in galactic history. Instead of attacking or fleeing, the humans began broadcasting everything that made them human. They transmitted recordings of human laughter, children playing, people singing together. They showed the probe videos of humans dancing badly at weddings, making art that served no practical purpose, and playing games just for fun. Marcus flew the shuttle in patterns. inspired by figure skating routines and roller coaster loops. Amy mixed human music with sounds of earth, rain, wind, ocean waves, birds singing. Lisa made their energy systems, pulse in rhythms that matched human heartbeats and breathing. Jake coordinated it all while juggling and talking to the probe like it was a friend he was introducing to his family. See, the thing about humans is, we do stuff because we like it, not because it's useful, he said into the communication system. We make music that sounds pretty. We dance because it feels good. We tell jokes to make each other laugh. We're probably the only species in the galaxy that does things just for the joy of it. The probe's behavior began to change. Its movements became less aggressive and more curious. Its scans shifted from tactical analysis to what seemed like genuine interest. Is it working? Marcus asked, spinning them through a move inspired by a gymnastics routine. I think so, Jake said. Look at its positioning. It's not trying to find our weaknesses anymore. It's trying to understand what we're showing it. Zefkari suddenly spoke up from where he'd been silently observing. Jake, I'm detecting changes in the probe's internal systems. It's not just analyzing your behavior. It's starting to replicate some of your patterns. What do you mean? Its movement algorithms are becoming less efficient, but more varied. It's beginning to move in ways that serve no tactical purpose. Jake looked out at the probe and saw that Zefkari was right. The massive machine was starting to move in gentle curves instead of straight lines. Its energy patterns were becoming more complex and rhythmic. It's learning to play, Amy whispered in amazement. More than that, Jake said, watching the probe's increasingly artistic movements. It's learning to be creative. The transformation was remarkable to watch. The Void Singer probe, designed as the ultimate weapon of destruction, was discovering concepts it had never encountered before: joy, beauty, playfulness, the idea of doing something for no reason other than the pleasure of doing it. Over the communication system, they began receiving signals from the probe. Not tactical data or threats, but something that sounded almost like music. The ancient machine intelligence was trying to create its own version of the human chaos it had been observing. This is incredible, Zefkari said, his 4 eyes wide with wonder. In one afternoon, you've taught a 3,000-year-old intelligence entirely new ways of thinking. But will it stop destroying civilizations? Lisa asked Dot as if in answer to her question. The probe began broadcasting a new signal. This one was directed not at their shuttle, but out into deep space where the rest of the Void Singer fleet was waiting. Amy worked frantically to decode the transmission. It's calling off the attack, she said in disbelief. It's telling the other ships that this civilization has something new to offer. Something worth preserving. The probe began moving away from Kepler Station, but its movements were completely different now. Instead of the rigid, efficient patterns of a war machine, it flowed through space like a dancer, its systems pulsing with rhythms that seemed almost alive. As it departed, it sent one final transmission to their shuttle. Amy translated the message with tears in her eyes. Thank you for teaching us to wonder. The trip back to Kepler Station was quiet. The 4 humans sat in their small shuttle, trying to process what they had just accomplished. They had faced the greatest threat in galactic history and defeated it not through superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by being themselves. How do we explain this? Marcus asked as the station grew larger ahead of them. I don't think we can, Jake said. I mean, who's going to believe that we stopped an ancient killing machine by teaching it to appreciate jazz music and figure skating? The whole galaxy is going to want to study us now, Lisa pointed out. Everyone's going to want to understand how human minds work. Jake shrugged and started tossing his baseball again. Let them study. Maybe they'll learn something useful. When they docked at Kepler Station, they found themselves surrounded by aliens who looked at them with something approaching awe. Commander Yelenov's blue skin had returned to its normal color, And she was smiling for the first time since the crisis began. "How did you do it?" she asked. "Our sensors showed no weapons fire, no conventional tactics. The probe simply left." "We showed it something new," Jake said simply. "Something it had never seen before." "What?" Jake looked around at all the alien faces staring at him with hope and confusion and wonder. Somewhere out in the galaxy, a fleet of ancient machines was learning new ways to think. Back on Earth, his family was probably wondering how his first week of college was going. "We showed it how to be human," he said finally. "Turns out that was exactly what the universe needed." Dr. Nexara stepped forward, her scientific excitement barely contained. "Jake Morrison of Earth, your species has just changed the course of galactic history. What do you plan to do now?" Jake grinned and caught his baseball one more time. "I think I'm going to finish my homework. I've got that engineering project due tomorrow, and I still haven't figured out the power systems."